Just to clarify before I start, no, I am not referring to the answer to a math problem or something similar. I'm referring to problems you have in your life, mostly as it relates to your progression. A lot of people have these seemingly unsolvable problems that they just can't find a solution to. This is what the title is referring to. The fact that you already know how to solve the problem, you just refuse to apply the solution. I'll start by using myself as an example, since I think it's something most of us can relate to. A few years back, I stumbled across an opportunity to work in a lab for a summer to sort of get my hands wet and experience what it was like to be a researcher. Anyone who has worked in the field will tell you the same thing, and that is that research often gives negative results. It's probably one of the most masochistic fields you can run into, because you could spend weeks or even months on this one project, only for it to fail on all fronts and force you to either try a different approach or scrap the project entirely. Unfortunately for me, I had a large ego back then, so I thought to myself, sure, you all may struggle with problems, but not me. I'm a straight A student. I can never fail. I'm perfect, etc., etc. Needless to say, I was in for a rude awakening. My first reaction, a reaction designed to work, only ended up giving me an 11.8% yield. If you've done any chemistry, you know that 11.8% is horrible, at least in most cases. Now, this wasn't the only failure I experienced. I actually failed many reactions afterwards that were not guaranteed. Now, with my failures on the guaranteed reactions, I started to question whether or not the reaction was failing because it just wasn't meant to be, or if it were my own personal shortcomings that were preventing me from getting any results. Deep down, I knew my inexperience was probably the cause of these failures, but it took a lot of self-reflection to finally get to the point where I was ready to accept that as a plausible solution. Once I looked at it from that angle, all of a sudden I was able to start producing better results. By questioning everything I was doing, I was forced to make sure that everything I was doing made sense. The reason I bring this story up is to tell you that sometimes the solution you don't want to accept is the only one that can solve the problem. If you don't fix that, you'll be one of those people I mentioned earlier that are stuck with these perennial problems as if they have no way out. Don't fall into the pitfall of trying to solve everything around the problem, no matter how uncomfortable the problem makes you when it is addressed head on. Oftentimes, if it is something you want or need to address, it will be worth the momentary discomfort in exchange for a long-lasting fulfillment. Now, one big factor in this is how. How do I go about finding that solution I'm not willing to accept? Well, in my case, it came through rigorous self-reflection. My self-concept was being challenged by failure, so I had no choice but to react. Otherwise, I'd be trapped with the feeling that I'm living a lie. In fact, most people who say that they are people who are unable to accept their shortcomings or other changes in their life that make their self-concept inaccurate, and so they think they are one thing but are living like another. This is what makes them feel the dissonance that they are experiencing. I understand that not everyone has the time to sit down and critically evaluate their situation, so I do have an alternative solution for you fellows that need a solution ASAP. One thing you can do is when you think of the problem, immediately pay attention to the first solution that comes to mind. Generally speaking, your gut instinct will show you what is wrong for a brief second before you choose to disregard it consciously. This is, of course, different for every person in terms of accuracy, but most times, your first choice is your best choice. This even applies to multiple choice tests too. If I remember, I'll put the link in the description, but basically they show that changing your answer increased your chances of getting the question wrong, and that going with your gut was always, or not always, but generally the best method. Another thing worth noting is that problems always have multiple solutions. So let's say you're stuck in a rut at your job or something and you feel like you've stagnated. You have numerous options to leave that feeling behind. You can go search for a new job, or you can negotiate to your higher-ups for a better position or a raise. As a side note, if you want to negotiate properly, you have to show them that you are worth what you want. I plan on expanding on this topic in a future video, but for now, just know that if you don't show the traits of a given position before you ask for that position, you likely won't be given that position. Back to the top though, you have multiple options for getting out of that rut that you see yourself in. And so if you sit and think about the pros and cons of each option, you will find that your gut will instinctively pick one before you have consciously made your choice. Do take note that both options will be uncomfortable at first. Going on interviews for a new job while you are currently employed is difficult, especially if you work full-time and can't afford to take too many days off. Negotiating with your manager can also be a pain depending on who your manager is and will likely feel very uncomfortable, especially if you are an agreeable person. But if you do not accept these solutions, which you already know of, you will be saddled with that problem for as long as you allow it to exist. But that is all I have to say for this video. Let me know down below if you've ever had a problem with an obvious solution that you just didn't solve simply because you didn't like the solution. I have a feeling that everyone has been in this position at least once in their lives. But yeah, other than that, have a nice day and keep on prospering.